You're pulled over. It feels routine at first. License, registration, a few standard questions, nothing unusual. Then the officer steps back, speaks briefly into the radio, and comes back with a sentence that instantly changes the situation. The dog already alerted. In that moment, everything shifts. The tone, the pressure, the uncertainty. And most people, without realizing it, say something that removes their legal protection before they even understand what's happening. Not because they're guilty, not because they're hiding anything, but because they don't know what that statement actually means under the law. So let me ask you this, and I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If an officer tells you a K-9 unit has already alerted to your car, do you believe you still have the right to refuse a search? Think about that carefully, because the answer is not as obvious as it sounds, and misunderstanding it can have serious consequences. Now let's break this down in a way most people never hear explained. When law enforcement refers to a K-9 alert, they are talking about a trained detection dog signaling the possible presence of narcotics or other contraband. In legal terms, that alert can be used to establish probable cause, and probable cause is critical. Under the Fourth Amendment, law enforcement generally needs probable cause to conduct a search without a warrant. A properly trained and certified K-9 alert has been recognized by courts as one possible basis for that standard. But here's where it becomes complicated. Not every alert is automatically valid in the eyes of the law. In my legal analysis, courts would likely examine several key factors: the reliability of the dog, the training and certification records, the handler's conduct, and the circumstances of the stop itself. This is not a simple yes or no situation. It is a fact-driven legal question. Historically, the use of K-9 units in policing expanded significantly in the late 20th century, particularly during the escalation of drug enforcement efforts. Courts were asked to determine whether a dog's alert could justify a search, and over time, precedent developed. One of the most important Supreme Court cases in this area is Florida versus Harris. In that case, the court held that a dog's alert can provide probable cause if the dog is properly trained and certified. However, the court also made clear that defendants must have the opportunity to challenge that reliability. That detail matters, because it means a K-9 alert is not automatically beyond question. Now let's bring this back to the moment of the traffic stop. An officer says, "The dog already alerted." What does that mean for you, right then and there? In many cases, the officer is asserting that they now have probable cause to search your vehicle without your consent. And this is where many people make a critical mistake. They assume that because the officer claims probable cause, they have no rights left in the interaction. That's not accurate. You still have rights, but how you exercise them must be lawful, respectful, and precise. There is a simple, legally grounded response that preserves your position without escalating the situation. I do not consent to any searches. That statement does not interfere with the officer's actions. It does not challenge authority in a confrontational way. It simply makes your position clear on the record. In my legal analysis, that distinction is extremely important, because if the search is later challenged in court, the issue of consent becomes central. If you gave consent, even unintentionally, the legal argument changes dramatically. If you did not consent, courts would likely examine whether the officer truly had probable cause based on the K-9 alert. And that brings us back to the Fourth Amendment. The entire framework is built around reasonableness and justification. Courts are not just looking at what happened. They are looking at whether it was legally justified under the circumstances. Now let's consider the Fifth Amendment. During this interaction, anything you say can be used as evidence. You are not required to answer questions that could incriminate you. However, you must comply with lawful orders and remain respectful. In my legal analysis, the safest approach is controlled communication. Short answers, clear boundaries, no unnecessary explanations. Because in high-pressure moments, people often talk themselves into legal complications without realizing it. Now let's address the Second Amendment dimension, because this situation can become even more complex for lawful gun owners. If you are legally carrying a firearm, your obligations vary depending on state law. Some states require immediate disclosure, others do not. Some require permits. Others allow constitutional carry. If a K-9 alert leads to a search and a firearm is discovered, the legal focus shifts, not necessarily to wrongdoing, but to compliance. Was the firearm lawfully possessed? Was it stored correctly? Were all disclosure requirements followed? There is a strong constitutional argument that lawful firearm possession should not create suspicion, and recent Supreme Court decisions have reinforced individual Second Amendment protections. However, courts would likely examine the totality of the situation, including officer safety concerns and the sequence of events during the stop. In my legal analysis, lawful gun owners must be especially aware of how quickly a routine stop can evolve into a legally complex situation. Now let's talk about federal versus state context. Traffic stops are governed primarily by state law, but constitutional protections apply nationwide. That means your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights are consistent, but how probable cause is interpreted can vary slightly based on jurisdiction. This layered system creates confusion for many drivers, and that confusion is often where mistakes happen. Now consider the real-world impact. An officer states that a dog alerted. You feel pressure, you feel uncertainty. You may even feel that the outcome is already decided. But your response still matters. Because even if a search proceeds, your words and your lack of consent can become critical factors later. Supporters of canine-based enforcement argue that trained detection dogs are valuable tools. They can identify substances that humans cannot detect and help law enforcement act efficiently. And there is validity in that argument. However, critics point out concerns about reliability, handler influence, and the potential for alerts to be misinterpreted or overstated. In my legal analysis, both perspectives deserve attention. Courts would likely continue to evaluate these cases carefully, balancing law enforcement needs with constitutional protections. Now let's talk about political reality. There is currently no widespread legislative movement to eliminate canine use in traffic stops. In fact, these practices remain broadly accepted within the legal system. However, there is ongoing legal debate about how probable cause is established and how technology and training standards should evolve. That means this area of law is stable, but not static. Looking ahead, the long-term implications are clear. As scrutiny increases and legal challenges continue, courts may refine how canine alerts are evaluated. Standards for training, certification, and documentation may become more rigorous, and drivers who understand these developments will be better prepared to navigate real-world encounters. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about resisting law enforcement. It's about understanding the law as it actually works. It's about knowing the difference between authority and assumption. It's about protecting your rights while fully respecting the legal process. So when you hear the words, "the dog already alerted," remember this: stay calm, stay respectful, and make your position clear, not with emotion, not with argument, but with simple, lawful clarity. I do not consent to any searches. If this helped you understand a situation most people are completely unprepared for, subscribe for more clear, real-world legal breakdowns, and share your thoughts in the comments, because informed discussion is how people learn to navigate these moments responsibly. Know your rights, respect the law, and never assume you understand the rules until you've taken the time to truly learn them.